All right, we're live.
Yeah, you guys are live already. Whee! What's the professionalism level of eating a taco on camera?
One bite.
I think it's allowed.
I think it's cool.
Jim, one bite.
One bite that's
You have to name the sponsor too.
I got you. Boy, these tacos. Why is this not on? Is yours on? Is there things with here?
This is,
I don't think we had room sound yesterday.
You did.
Yeah.
I thought.
I don't see the green light.
I don't believe it.
this is even plugged in.
Master switch or something. There's one right here. Maybe.
Stand by.
Oh,
Oh, here it is.
Jim did it. I found it.
Throw me under the bus much?
Right over there.
How are we even now?
Good exercise, everybody. We'll be back in 10. We'll get this going. Thank you so much for coming up. First thing in the morning. I know that I got to sleep approximately 7 hours ago, so yay. Darian, what time did you get to sleep last night?
I don't remember. It's all a fog now after the hospitality suite. So.
You're very hospitable. And you were probably in bed by like 9:15, I'm guessing?
11:30. I had to do airport pickup run. So, sorry.
Because your son hasn't heard of Uber.
I haven't introduced him to that yet. No. Yeah. Hey, I missed him. I was gonna pick him up.
Well, that's sweet.
Yeah.
Miguel?
I don't remember when I went to that either, but it was before you. I remember saying it, and yeah, coffee helps.
It does. This is actually going to be a little bit of a fun panel. We want you guys to all join in because I thought it'd be a good way to kind of kickstart the last day of the festival and talk about this one thing that I think is probably the most important part of movies is movies that inspire us because we're all here. We all make a different kind of film. And I thought it could be sort of fun to talk about where we came from as different individuals. Some of us I know like much of the same stuff, but how it ended up channeling into very different film careers. And so I thought it'd become kind of fun to kind of go down the road, just like your favorite movie of all time, just to kind of kick this started. And we'll start with Darian on my left.
That's a lot of pressure. Why do I gotta start? I didn't know what you were gonna ask that. My favorite movie of all time.
You don't keep a notes list with your top 53 because I do.
I have like top 10, but they're all kind
Like
of
one does.
like today. Like they're all together. They're not, I don't have like a favorite, but I'll just go with Do the Right Thing since that was it had a tremendous impact on me because I was living in Brooklyn. I was 12 years old when it came out, and 14 years old when it came out. It just kind of, I guess it was shot like 6 blocks from my house, and it was like, oh wow, Black people can make movies. I'm in.
It's going to be a discussion you and I will have after the club. Maybe need your help with something. Mine is Jaws, which I think anybody who's had a conversation with me longer than 30 seconds knows that. My mother claims, no, look, she's not watching. She's a bit of a fibber. And she claims that the first time she felt me move when I was in utero was while watching the movie. I don't think that's true, but I think it's a super cool story if you become a filmmaker for that to be your bio. So yeah, Jaws, absolutely number one for me.
For me, it's Star Wars. I was 12 when it came out and everything. So what happened prior to that, King Kong had come out, the movie, and that was the first movie that I didn't just watch. I wanted to know how it was made. So for King Kong, I was like, magazines and books, how did they make that guy move? And so that introduced the door. Once Star Wars came around, it blew the door open for me, and I wanted to know everything, how movies were made from Star Wars on. I wanted to get behind the camera and know how movies were made.
And sorry, so are we answering the favorite movie or the one that inspired us to do it? Because it's two different answers.
I went favorite. Darian went off the rails at the beginning.
Okay.
I'm trying to figure out how the first movie that came out for David was King Kong. I'm presuming you don't mean the 1930 something.
No, Dino.
All right, well, for favorite, I'm gonna say two, because one of them is also Star Wars. Although I didn't see it when it came out, I saw it on video.
Leave it to the Canadian, he's afraid of offending a second movie, so he doesn't want to leave one out.
And also, I would say Casablanca is probably the one. If you were to actually pick a movie that I watch the most often and enjoy the most on a regular basis, it's Casablanca.
I feel like you and I are like, yeah, Jaws and Star Wars, and they're like, oh yeah, one of the most important movies made, one of the most important movies.
It's really very small.
Very good, very much.
But it's not really, yeah, sure, it's one of the most important movies. But before that, I was just watching movies, you know? I mean, Do the Right Thing was the movie that kind of crystallized everything to me that, you know, one person could be an auteur and create something and tell a very personal story on a kind of broad commercial level. But before that, I was watching Star Wars. And I mean, I was born in '74, so I actually remember going to Star Wars and its re-releases. And I remember my dad used to get Starlog magazine and Cinefeds, what's it, Feds? Was it? Fantastique.
Yeah, that's
So he'd get all the special effects magazine. So I was like already into that stuff, but it was all fantasy to me. It wasn't like, you know, you go to movies and you see how, you know, they make, you know, bring this stuff to life, but it never really crystallized to me like, oh, that's a job. It was just like, it was like an amusement park, going to see Flash Gordon or
right.
seeing how it was made. And that never really made a difference to me until, you know, actually like the first movie that really kind of touched me as a film, as a story about people that I could understand was Paul Mazursky's Moscow on the Hudson.
Which you recommended to me.
Yeah.
When we had the whole pandemic, and I was like, yeah, I need a film from every decade, and that was your.
And it's this movie that my mom took me to see in '82, '83. It's Robin Williams, like his second film, maybe second or third feature where he plays a Russian who defects to New York.
I reviewed it for the Daily Texan.
Oh,
And it's really like one of his most amazing, underappreciated performances because he totally becomes this Russian saxophone player. He learned to play the saxophone for this movie. But also it's like one of the greatest stories about the New York experience, I think, ever. And to this day, I probably watch it twice a year. And when I was doing the Sony Directors Diversity Program, and they asked me what I wanted to make from the Sony catalog, because they didn't want to hear any of my new ideas at all. What would you like to remake? And I knew that was in the Sony catalog, and they were like, no. We don't make immigrant movies anymore. So, I was like, yeah, but what if I did it with a Nigerian?
You're still.
They're like, good luck with your career.
Yeah. Well, there's really no plan. I want you guys to jump in where you feel like we'll get to y'all's. But what I think is interesting too is not just that. Like obviously, Spike Lee he's a movie that is a filmmaker that looks like you. And what I was kind of getting at is that my cousin also looks like you, and he thinks Tyler Perry's the best African American filmmaker of all time. So we might need to take care of that.
Well, you know.
Like, have you seen anyone? But Spike Lee's also part of this, like the beginning of that indie movement that for like a blink of an eye, like it's Tim, it's Kevin Smith, it's Tarantino and Burns, like that really changed film for a lot of people. Like we're not here if those guys don't exist.
Not, absolutely not. I mean, you probably read Spike, Mike, Slackers and Dykes, like everyone else in the 90s.
Right.
Going into film. And yeah, those guys were kind of like it. You know, once I realized who Spike was and saw him around the neighborhood all the time and realized that kind of success was that accessible that, you know, then you just kind of dive into everybody.
So I think it's interesting because you and I are probably inspired from some of the same spots, but you were doing film independently before those guys. So what made you decide that you I said what I said, and I'm okay with it.
Well, first, I started off with documentary film work because that's like the easiest thing to get into, because you just can take something from your world and you think you can tell their story. And so, but after doing that, it took us a year and a half of the shooting. I promised my wife the next one I did was gonna be a narrative feature, so we could control the workflow of it. So, and then it became, what can I do? And so I always write to my resources. I get inspired by the films that I grew up with, like mainly in the 80s stuff with John Hughes and Cameron Crowe and stuff like that. That's what I draw on. I Say Anything. I still watch that at least once a year because I think that's an amazing film. John Cusack is amazing. And to counter that, I don't watch a Sure Thing. But that's what I grew up watching. As far as dialogue and relationship, that's how I began. So.
Well, I do think that's something we share because both of us are very into like the Spielberg thing and the Star Wars thing, but yet our movies are people talking to each other in a room. And as I think so
Because you can, that's what you can afford to make.
Well, it's awesome too. Like I can watch, I can watch Almost Famous and be inspired to make all the movies after that. Or I rewatched Jerry Maguire on a whim the other day and forgot how well written that movie is.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's just interesting that you can get inspiration from lots of places. Now you have a fun story about when Mike decided that you can make a movie, and as age-wise, you started probably before any of us, if you think about the chronology of your life.
Yeah, I think 6. Yeah, I was at Disney World with my family. My favorite movie at the time was Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. And they had this demonstration at this huge, like 40-foot bumblebee in front of a huge blue screen. And they were showing how to do special effects. Like they would take out the blue, and we all know what that is now. But at the time, a lot of the average public didn't. I certainly didn't either. I thought it was all real. I mean, and because it was my favorite movie, my parents kind of went up. They must have slipped a 20 or whatever. They got the line. They're like, "Can you make our kids the ones we pick for the demonstration?" So we go on this big bee, and they pull us out in front of a room full of people, and they're asking us to scream, and they strap us in, and I feel like an idiot. I remember specifically feeling like a moron. I was so nervous, and I was in front of a whole bunch of people, and you're 6 years old and asking you to scream, and it's like, no, I'm tough. I'm not gonna. And so it was weird. And anyway, I looked like an idiot doing it. I felt like an idiot. And then they brought down a projection screen, and they did a quick blue screen key, and they had footage of Rick Moranis from the movie swinging a baseball bat, and they had been zooming in and out on the bee, and it looked. And now all of a sudden, I'm in my favorite movie, and it was like. The difference between how like boring and sterile the experience and awkward it was, and then in spite of all of that, now I'm in the favorite thing that I love. I was like, I want to do that. Like I love the fact that you could take something so phony and turn it into something so like magical.
And you're kind of fun because sometimes you will post some of the digitized videos that you made, like your Star Wars movie that you made. So when did you first say like I'm gonna? Because I know you did a Ghostbusters thing, right? A Ninja Turtles. Like, when did you first start deciding that was what you were going to do and get to work on?
Like in terms, like just for fun.
Yeah.
So when I got home from Disney World, no, I'm not kidding. The first movie I ever did, I was like 6 in a week or whatever, like whatever it was, and I did my own. I had a Ninja Turtles toy that was like a big one and a small one, and we figured, okay, well if we start filming and stop filming, can replace the Ninja Turtle, and I can shrink them. And so we had, I was like this little, okay, Mom, you make the sound effect with the little machine that we've got, and then you press stop at this time, and we queued it all up. And so yeah, there's like this little movie, and I started doing magic hacks, was what it was. So I started just whenever they would let me borrow the camera, because at first they needed to, operate it, but eventually they trusted me with it. And I would just kind of experiment with, illusions and stuff like that, and using film to do it. And
This is like a VHS.
this was a high 8, I think
Okay.
it was. Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah. And but it was great. And so I've probably got, or I don't, but I think my mom still has piles and piles of Mike's Magic Hacks and movies, volume 7, 8, 9, and just loads of tapes. Haven't seen them in years, but.
I think we need to arrange a screening next
I
year.
do, yes.
Guys, Friday at 7:00. Listen to this. Do you guys find that movies like do you rewatch Do the Right Thing with any degree of regularity?
Maybe once a year. During the pandemic, I did the whole Spike Lee filmography thing. Like I'm sure we all went through a bunch of lists. We were just there, so I did that.
I did it because it was going to be 2 weeks.
Yeah, exactly. Not gonna bother.
Right.
But yeah, I watch it at least once a year. I think my daughter's like ready to watch it now, so I'm kind of excited about that. She's starting to watch kind of more serious fare now. She's 12, but and she loves Marvel, but to be sure. But like lately, she's been like, like she really got into what was the Greta Gerwig film from a couple years ago.
Lady Bird?
Lady Bird, yeah.
Okay.
And I hadn't seen it, but I walked in the other day and she was like watching it. And then I walked back the other day again, and she was watching it again. I was like, okay, maybe I should watch this movie. but I thought, oh yeah, well she's kind of like, she's growing up, and she's reading more mature books, and she's watching the news, and she's like telling me she wants to be a communist and all this stuff. So it's a whole new thing.
Do you are you still able to find something new maybe that you didn't see before, or even some little nugget from the movie that reminds you of why it was important to you from the beginning?
Absolutely. I mean, and that's also the exciting thing about watching movies with kids. And like, even when I first showed her Star Wars, there was still stuff I was seeing because I was watching it through her eyes, or E.T.
Yeah.
Especially E.T., which she hated.
Oh, I will get that. I hated it too. But we'll get into that.
She hated it the first time she saw it, and she grew to love it, but she just did not appreciate the idea that E.T. and Elliot had to separate.
I hated it because I did not appreciate the fact that I wasn't allowed to see Return of the Jedi for the 4th time, and I had to go see some alien movie, and I sat and pouted for 2.5 hours, right?
But I think you always see, there's films that you see something new in every time, and then there's films that are just comfort. At this point, for me, I've probably dissected You the Right Thing so much, I'm not going to find anything new in it. But if I watch 400 Blows, or The Godfather, I'm still going to see stuff because those are films that I'm not as familiar with, but I do enjoy.
You should come over for the weekend. We'll have a great time. But no, the reason I asked the question, because I was talking with Jason earlier about I've never really abandoned physical media, and so I feel like I see a bigger difference from Blu-ray to 4K than I did from DVD to Blu-ray. And I know part of it's because like these movies I love, they're going back to the negative and they're repairing it. But I was watching when Jaws came back on the big screen last summer, and I found myself for the first time really and truly like watching the background and watching how cluttered Spielberg's frame is, how it all feels very, very lived in, from just the scene. Well, first of all, we got the great shot where it's a one, it doesn't feel like a oneer in front of the sign, but how chaotic the Brody household is. These are all things I didn't notice. And then when you're noticing it on the big screen, you're seeing it in a resolution you've never seen it in, I was starting to realize like, this is why it felt so real, because it was real. And then it made me realize like even flaws in my own work where I wasn't very good at that. Like I was always so focused on the sort of two people that the movie was on screen without worrying about what background was doing and things like that. And I think it's a difference between why he's him and I'm me, but also to me, again, it's another way to feel inspired, at least when I'm teaching my own students, of how everything in the frame is your responsibility to tell the story. I think Spielberg does a really good job of isolating those three characters and all of this actually going on around them. So I think that's why I asked the question. Thanks.
I watch Star Wars every year just because I want to be enjoyed, I want to be taken away. But I watch Jaws every year because I want to study it, because it is like a master class in filmmaking. Everything he does. So beginning of that with the re-release on the screen and everything, I just saw things that I hadn't seen before. And to your point about filling the screen, after our first film, Trip Into the Altar, I realized I was very focused on just the combination of shooting the people walking and talking. And so my wife, who was my co-producer on these projects, her job going forward has been everything outside of that. So you're watching the background, you're making sure that we're filling that whole screen, that every bit of that real estate we need to own. And so it's your job to make sure that because I'm gonna miss it, because I'm watching performance, I'm watching that, so I need you to cover my back and make sure that we're making it as real and full as we can.
And for me, like, and that's one thing Jessica kind of inserted herself in, because you look at my early stuff, my set design's garbage. Like, oh, it's a house, we have a table, and so that's all we need. And then you watch it later on, it doesn't feel lived in, but Jessica really became the person, and that became her job, because she recognized that I'm a kind of a space cadet and stuff like that. So it's kind of the same thing for me.
I thought it was interesting. So I got to see this summer the original Star Wars in the theater, which was really cool because the special edition from the recent special edition that Disney has on Disney Plus, but theatrical.
Oh, we're getting into a Han shot conversation. That is certainly on the agenda, everybody.
No, it was the best redo of it that they've done yet. No, but anyway, so what was really interesting about it is I've obviously seen a million versions of A New Hope many times, but I've only seen it once in theaters. And it was when the special edition came out in the 90s, and that was the only time I'd seen it. Everything else was on VHS or DVD or whatever. And so seeing it for the second time in theaters, I was astonished about how well that movie plays on a big screen. And it was funny because then seeing the other two, they obviously play really good because I also really like those movies. But the original Star Wars actually played the most differently for me in the theater.
Okay.
There was something about the framing and about the pacing and the way that certain things were highlighted in the shot. It was like you feel it more. And it could have also just been the audience. It was a really great audience. We were all cheering.
That matters, right?
Yeah. But it was. I just remembered feeling like at the end of the movie. I always really liked Star Wars, and I always really knew that Star Wars was really popular. But at the end of seeing it in the theater, I had this feeling in my stomach, and I was like, okay, that's why this movie was a hit. Like I feel it now. Like if everybody saw the movie on a big screen like this, which they would have, it's like there's no fucking way that you're not going to love this. Like it was just so cool.
I have it on Laserdisc, by the way.
Do you? Nice.
Yes, I don't have a Laserdisc player.
Gary, it's a Laserdisc.
I'm waiting for the technology to come back.
I have the DVD that
But
has.
it's like the original, I have
Yeah.
the original print of Laserdisc.
Yeah. Well, no. So they
And I
released
have the
DVDs
DVD with me,
originals.
so the special feature was the,
Yeah.
and that's actually we'll dovetail in the next conversation. But first I want to hear from you guys, like, what are some movies that are the reason why you're sitting here? Drew, I'd really like to know what, Drew, what's your electroshock therapy treatment got you?
Well, growing up as a kid, I really liked Ghostbusters, and out of everyone in the cast that I fantasized being, it was Walter Peck.
This man has no dick. That's what I heard.
I'm gonna miss.
I'm gonna miss it. What about Walter? Why Walter Peck?
I just think he's a badass.
You rooted for the principal. You rooted for the principal in Ferris Bueller, didn't you? You're like, no, he's got a point. He's absent and it's wrong.
He drives that movie.
He really does.
But is like William Atherton also your favorite character in Die Hard? Like, are you rooting for him to like take down McClane's family?
I mean, that guy's pretty crazy. Yeah. I don't know. I've always liked villains. Villains are great. So I don't know.
Put that hot. I'll call the INS. Who else would like to share? Yes, sir. Please, thank you.
So I saw 2001: A Space Odyssey when I was 4 years old. Blew my mind, and my parents showed me on VHS, and unfortunately not in a big screen ever. I'm gonna do that someday, but I saw it like about every decade, and each time I was at a different stage in life, and I just kept seeing it differently every single time it happened, and it just like I'm really into science fiction. That started my whole obsession with the genre, but visually too, there were just like things that like the monkey's throwing the bone and the bone becomes a spaceship, like that iconic moment just like got seared into my brain. but I took a different path and I didn't start making movies until I was about like 34 or something. And
Well, that's weird because you look 23.
Yeah.
I was almost like, guys, don't cuss. There's this high school student.
what, maybe 30, what, 31?
Yeah.
31.
He's pushing 40.
I'm pushing 40.
Ooh.
Not 30.
Push back as hard as you can.
Yeah, you don't look for it.
Yeah, but Kubrick is, big inspiration, and I like all his movies. But 2001, I can still watch it and like take new things from it. And I've seen it now about 4 or 5 times all the way through. It's just one of my favorite movies still to this day.
It was interesting because you talked about the big screen, and you a movie that I hated as a kid was Close Encounters. And then but then I saw it on the big screen, and it was like the new, and now it's like a favorite. I watch it often. They teach it now, and it's just interesting how some movies are just made to be seen, 40 feet high or whatever it is, and experienced that way. So I think it's 2001's always missed me. I've never been. Are you guys?
I've never seen it all the way through at one time. I've seen it all together, but I've never sat through the whole thing all the time. Yeah, I have it in pieces every time.
I love 2001. The first time I saw it was I was probably 7 or 8 years old in New York, and they showed it on PBS. And it was the first time, so I watched it with my dad. It was the first time I'd ever seen a film presented on television in the widescreen format, ever. And this was like 82, 83, something like that. And so I was like totally baffled by what this was. And my father had to explain to me, this is how you're meant to be seeing this picture. And we had to go to my grandparents' house to watch it because our color TV was broken. And they had the largest color TV in our family at the time, a whole 27 inches. And it was huge, gigantic. But that was my first experience with the picture. But, my dad was pretty cool in that he took me to a lot of films, that used to play at the Ziegfeld in New York. Like I remember going to see Apocalypse Now with him and whatever. But it's just heavy metal. He really was like progressive in what he took me to see, because also there weren't like movies made for kids. So as long as I would sit there with my popcorn, I would get to see a show, yeah. So.
As an aside, because you obviously pretty close and had you on the baseball. I love that so many of the things you love are connected to your family, like baseball and this. It's a beautiful thing. In many ways, I'm connected to things despite my family. So I just just find it interesting. Let's see what I want to pick on. Patty, who's only been here for about 12 hours,
Yes.
but has been here in our hearts all the time. What is something that drove you cinematically?
If I'm honest, the first thing that came to mind was saying Sense and Sensibility, the Emma Thompson. I'm a huge Jane Austen fan, and I also watched, like my mom, I feel like I was raised on Jane Austen, and watching it and feeling like, how are they explaining to a current audience how repressed and like unable to speak about things, and how she made it so clear. And I was like, that is magical. Like, it's just like really being able to take this other time in the world and make it understandable and beautiful and fun. So that's one of
And how old were you like when you first saw it? Because it seems like
like
it's heavy, like for.
Well, I mean, I was, if I'm honest, I'm like getting flashbacks of like the VHSs that we had, and like we had, I was younger when we watched it, but we watched it. I mean, perennial watching was part of the life, Yeah.
Do you have? I mean, I still have VHS and Laserdisc, and I have DVDs. I mean, I've kept all my physical media, much to the chagrin of my wife. But it's
protect the one VHS
much to the
player.
chagrin of my wife's husband. I got rid of all the old stuff as we got new stuff. So sometimes she asks, "Hey, do we have that Little Mermaid?" And then I found out it was worth money. Nope, unfortunately, we don't. A couple more people. Melissa, what about you?
Oh boy, it's hard to pick a favorite, but if I had to, because you're putting me on the spot, Never Ending Story. That movie like got me through a lot of childhood stuff. I don't replay movies anymore, like I'll just watch them once.
Okay.
But that one I watched a lot. And it helps me with my feelings.
Okay.
Very cool.
Last but not least. Let's go. Because there's a genre we've all been missing in everybody's answer. I'm hoping we'll get it now.
Yeah, I would say it was definitely like Mel Brooks and Monty Python.
Damn it. I mean, no, great. That's not what I was thinking.
I was gonna say Blazing Saddles.
Baseball.
Yeah. Well, I just figured one of the people would have been like Halloween or
The Thing.
right, or The Exorcist or The Thing, yeah.
I was gonna say, pretty much all the films that you mentioned, influences of filmmaking, particularly Star Wars, and that may be one of the movies, but since we're on that subject, as a kid, I wasn't normally going to the theater, so I caught a lot of stuff on television, including made-for-TV movies by the likes of Dan Curtis. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but Trilogy of Terror with the little fetish doll, and his adaptations of Dracula and Frankenstein and Curse of the Black Widow.
Like the doll who goes after Karen Black.
That's right. That one, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what's kind of cool about horror movies, though. Like, horror movies, good, bad, or indifferent, can influence. Like, not a lot of cheap Star Wars knockoffs are gonna, like, no one's saying Krull, right? As their
I was going to actually.
But no one's saying Krull, but you can say, like, I don't know. We were talking about this, or thinking about this in Jason's panel yesterday about going to the video store. And for me, it was like Jack Frost, right? It was this snowman that can melt himself and then kill people, or Uncle Sam, the veteran who like ran the flag through the guy and he saluted it. He's got, good, bad, or different horror can drive you. But I want to get back to this sort of intellectual question that I had. That's right. We're going to think a little bit. My students right now in my film critique class are looking at Star Wars a little bit differently. And so we're watching it in the following order, and I'm not looking for an opinion. I'm not looking for, well, you should try this. Okay. I'm a professional teacher. And I'll just play one on TV. So we're starting with Rogue One, then we're doing A New Hope, then we're doing Empire, then we're doing The Clone Wars, then we're doing Revenge of the Sith, and then we're doing Return of the Jedi, with the idea being that Lucas is sort of, I think, mistaken, and I think it's a Luke Skywalker story, not an Anakin Skywalker story. And then it also allows the Luke parentage reveal stay intact, because I think it's done better in Empire. But I also think Revenge of the Sith does a better job of revealing Leia, because it almost happens kind of off screen in Return of the Jedi. But it begged the question, because he came to speak to the kids, and then there was a whole Han shot first conversation of, at what point does art belong to us, or does it always belong to the artist? Like, before I turn over to you guys, the premise of Lucas looking back at something he made when he didn't know what he was doing, he had no money and wanted to fix things, I get it. Like, when it comes to changing story, I think is where the line draws. But what do you guys think? Like, at what point, you want to start, Mike, with?
Sure. I mean, I think it's difficult because in the instance of Star Wars specifically, I think that there's a historical value to that original version, regardless of what anybody thinks. And it's kind of a shame that there isn't a high quality version of that exists legally anywhere. And so they have ones, right? Like I haven't actually seen them. Have any of you guys seen those? They constructed things from different pieces of film that they scanned or whatever. All right, we'll talk. But I think that see, there's also a part of me that's really, I mean, it's not like George Lucas needs, my satisfaction that he got to do whatever he wanted, but I like the idea that there's a guy that made a movie that he was never happy with, that he finally got to do whatever he wanted with. And I think that I kind of just wish that there were both versions of it. Like almost like I guess he did retitle it. It's not called Star Wars anymore. It is now called A New Hope, right?
Yeah.
But I do wish that it was that the original version, because I do actually kind of prefer the original one as well. Like I don't end up watching it that much because I only have it on a really low quality DVD. But there's something that feels a little bit more singular about it.
I do think Disney will. They like money. They will. I think we will finally get to see. Because I feel like Lucas almost held it back because he liked the idea that it pissed everyone off, and I feel like Disney likes money. And I know that we disagree because I don't mind some of the things that he did to make the scope feel bigger. I do mind that you've undercut one of the most iconic characters in cinema history's character arc, because in many ways, in A New Hope, he is Rick from Casablanca, right? He is Rick as I stick my neck out for no one, and Han's like, I'm in this for the money. And you lose the power of the arc when he goes from this guy whose name is literally Solo to I will be the one to lead the mission. That is now part of the family. You lose that when you take away from the fact that he's the guy that is willing to shoot first no matter what.
Yes. And well, what bothers me about what happened with Star Wars is that by making those additions in '97, I feel you slapped the face of all the technicians that put their blood and sweat into making those things explode, inventing this technology that made it work in '77. I mean, they were innovators, and by going back 20 years later and saying, but I can do it better now, it's like that you're slapping that artist in the face, and which I think you have to own it when he did it in '77, because I thought it was beautiful then, and for which time it was amazing. And I think that if he wanted to have a director's cut that extended the story, kind of thing that showed Han later, although don't step on Jabba the Hutt, I hated that.
Oh man, before you get to that, my students are just finished New Hope and why is this so bad? He just goes this and it's all goofy. Well, I'll explain to you why. Because it was actually a dude who played Jabba the Hutt at first.
Exactly. Yes. So that's my big thing is that there were these artists that technically made it work for you. You had an idea. They invented the technology, and by doing it in '97, you gave them a big slap in the face, and I didn't appreciate that. So,
where are you on that?
I think once it's done, it doesn't belong to the artist anymore. It belongs to the world, and you should just leave it alone and move on and create new work. That's what you should do. And the only reason that we have all these Star Wars editions is because Lucas wanted to experiment with technology so he could make the prequels, and so he kept fiddling around with the original.
Too bad you didn't experiment with some screenwriting technology.
Yeah, exactly. But it's all commerce. Like everything after all the special editions are all commerce, and that's fine. Money's great; it makes the world go round. But like to your point, for nearly 20 years, the Star Wars that I knew was only that Star Wars, without all the bells and whistles that he later added, and that was fine. That Star Wars sold $2 billion worth of Kenner stories, and it was re-released on its own, re-released like 4 or 5 times before the special editions. So I don't really care. I mean, my real problem is all of the unabashed Star Wars love and no love for Star Trek, which is much better in my opinion. So, just saying.
We're gonna take a break. We're gonna take a break because they're actually incomparable.
If I can say one thing just about the special edition stuff. So what I find interesting, so I did get into Star Wars before the special editions came out, by a few years, 2 or 3 years before. I'm big. But what happened was a lot of my friends didn't really care about Star Wars, but when the special editions came out, they did. Because for us, Star Wars was old movies that nobody cared about. And now that there were special editions and they did update certain things, it got them saying, oh, I'll watch this now. And then they did, and then they loved Star Wars. So there is an interesting aspect where I do think that the updates, while I don't necessarily like most of them, that's like a me thing, but they definitely did make a lot of other kids like Star Wars and all. So outside of the commerce aspect, I think that there's an interesting dynamic at play where it did make it relevant to a new generation of kids.
Well, I think I agree with Gary in a lot of that, and I think so much of this drama would be gone if the original cut was available. Right? At that point, do whatever you want to, and you can pick and choose. I mean, I do think that you hit on maybe the core problem of Star Wars altogether, and there's this sort of. We were talking to the guys from Behind the Bucket. If you didn't see that last night, it was an excellent documentary about Star Wars fandom, essentially. And no one hates Star Wars more than Star Wars fans. I remember sort of being really angry Well, first of all, I got out of Phantom Menace and I was like, that's the best movie I've ever seen. And I know it was because for 2 hours I went, I see Star Wars, I see Star Wars, I see Star Wars. And then I came down and I saw it again the next day. I was like, oh, okay, well, we're having a different experience. Because Lucas didn't make it for me. He made it for my daughter, right? And The Mandalorian, well, The Force Awakens or whatever, isn't made for me, it's made for my grandkid. And I think that's the thing we gotta remember is sometimes this stuff isn't necessarily made for us, but it does seem like part of it is that Lucas being so, I think, again, misunderstanding in many ways his own material and also saying this is the only way you get to experience it is, I think, a really big part of the problem. Anybody else want to, chime in on that? I mean, I know we got some Star Wars. Look, Star Trek is
better.
I mean,
So much better and substantial. I agree.
I recently saw this documentary about making Star Wars, some about icons on Earth, and one thing I never realized is the role his wife played in the first Star Wars. She was the editor, and they credit her with giving that movie heart. And so when she left that franchise, because their marriage, then a big part of that story of what made it special was gone, and it became him relying on his what he thought was funny, what he thought made sense, and he really missed an integral part of what made it great.
Well, yeah, what it is, it's you see it all the time when people have no one to limit them and they can do whatever they want. There's nothing to check it, and because to your point, his wife was a big part of it. The divorce did inspire Indiana Jones and Temple of Doom, which is one of my favorite sort of screenwriting stories. But also you had Lawrence Kasdan writing The Empire Strikes Back, and you had other people directing the other ones where all George had to do was build this world and let actual people who could do the heavy lifting do it. And most people, I think, agree that Empire is the best of the franchise. And so I think it's very interesting that you hit on the role of his wife being there to say, this does work or this doesn't.
Yeah.
Or the joke that how he directed all the actors was faster and more intense. It's the only direction he would give because he was trying to get the movie instead of realizing.
Lee Brackett on
And I-
Empire.
What? That's
Lee
right.
Brackett on
Well, the
Empire
first- yeah.
gets a lot of credit for the story too.
What is her name?
Marcia Lucas?
Marsha Lucas.
Thank you.
Yeah.
His wife thing
Oh, I just don't-
bothers me.
Yeah.
I honestly just don't remember.
I didn't remember her name.
Yeah.
And that bothers me on a deep level. As a female, my wife helped me make the background. My wife did this. What is her name?
Okay, this is purely, it's 10:15 and I went to bed.
And I'm not cracking on you guys. I'm just saying.
I'm not sure I
please be
remember my
aware.
own wife's
Oh, I
name.
just my wife.
And that's fine. Just please be aware that names are very important to
Yeah.
me as a female. I
Okay.
don't want to be my screenwriter husband's wife. I want to be myself too. So
It's
just a little.
very early
Little clip.
and we do a good job at this festival, I think, of representing and
Yes, you do.
celebrating women.
And
So-
that's why I was kind of calling you out on that.
Well, I would
because you do an
appreciate just,
amazing job.
we could do that offline.
I'm sorry.
We're just trying to have some fun.
And we are.
Speaking of,
But to that point about Lucas and the producers, and by the time you get to Return of the Jedi, where he has basically kicked out Marshall Lucas, he's gotten rid of the original producer of the first two Star Wars. He's gotten rid of everyone who kind of put him in check creatively, and that's why there are only 2 good Star Wars movies.
whoa,
I mean, the first two are
would say
great.
those two
Everyone after that
are
are kind of crappy, guys. They're kind of shitty movies. They're entertaining, but they're really not good after Empire.
I mean, I really definitely don't agree with that,
I can tell.
but
Yeah.
no, but that's I know that is a thought that a lot of
That's kind of when the floodgates opened and everyone was just like, we're gonna sell as much toys and shit as possible. And
it's interesting
that's
because-
all the
it really
franchise.
was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's all the franchise became. And that, not to say that there aren't like bright lights in it, like Rogue One, or there are great things about the franchise, to be sure. But I think the trajectory that was started with getting rid of Marshall Lucas and was it Rick McQuarrie, really.
Ralph was the concept artist.
Right.
He was the concept artist.
Well, that was the first.
Gary Kurtz.
Right.
Yeah.
So getting rid of those guys just, I don't think it ever really recovered, and that's why your fandom is like crazy now. They all want something different from the same franchise, and they can't agree on what's good. And it's very strange that Star Wars fans now are so bitter about the diversity in Star Wars because for so long you had none.
Right.
And so now to have some, it's like the Star Wars fans feel like something's being taken away from white counterparts because now there's so many women and dark people in Star Wars. This is not our Star Wars. This is terrible. It's so woke now. And I think we're ignoring that whole part of the Star Wars discussion, which is where it is now. And it's the toxicity of the fandom of the
Absolutely.
franchise.
Yeah,
I think is a huge problem. But I just wanted to throw that out.
Star Trek's not immune to that either.
Star Trek is not immune to that. However, Star Trek fans do watch Discovery and don't like complain about Michael Burnham being a black captain. You know, they complain about other woke aspects, but those people who are complaining about other woke aspects, you dig deeper, you find they aren't real Star Trek fans anyway. They're just kind of going in there kind of troll stuff. Because Star Trek fans have had black captains since the 80s. You know,
Right.
black women captains since the 80s. So it's not like a shocking thing. And Star Trek, I think, has always been about a progressive, you know.
Though there's still huge fights about that amongst the alleged fans.
Exactly, I agree. But I think that's all part of the new sci-fi toxicity. And there's a lot of those people who come over from Star Wars and try to remake Star Trek into Star Wars. And they're just people who are just mad about woke shit right now. So you know, I really have nothing to say to them about that. You know, I mean, I spent my whole lifetime, almost 50 now, and it's yes, yeah. And it's you know, I grew up my whole life almost seeing no representation on television. So, you know, I'm perfectly fine with over-representation right now.
Absolutely. I mean, they made what's her name quit because they didn't like having an Asian person in Star Wars.
Yeah.
And that's like the whole concept of nobody hates Star Wars as much as Star Wars.
I would just say that I love watching my child consume the new Star Wars stuff. Seeing them light up makes me like I don't get into the war politics of it all because he goes home and he gets his lightsaber out and he's doing the moves and that's why we make movies because it really inspires little ones to just go home and grab a camcorder and start making something fun.
To that Kelly Marie Tran point, when my daughter and I went to go see that picture, Kelly Marie Tran was her favorite character in the movie. And when she wasn't in the third one as much, and I had to tell her why and explain to her why, and you know, it really broke her heart. You know, my daughter's 12 now, and that whole Kelly Marie Tran situation forced me to have to explain to her how the world is extremely volatile toward women of color, especially in spaces where they feel like are secure spaces for white identity or whatever. And she just wanted to like Star Wars. She just wanted to see more of these, you know, her.
How did you take that when you had that conversation?
Not good.
Yeah.
Not good. You know, she went to the third movie, totally expecting to see more of Kelly Marie Tran and John Boyega together, and John Boyega was also kind of not in the third movie.
Yeah.
So yeah,
the Emperor was for some reason.
Yeah, for whatever reason.
Somehow.
Right. So yeah, that it's really hard when you have like these franchises that are trying to make these strides, and then fandom's like, no, we don't want it. No, thank you. We don't want it. Give us more of the old stuff. And so suddenly, characters that do have fan bases and are speaking to children who are from, you know, more diverse ethnic backgrounds are losing representation even when they're kind of given it in one movie, and it gets scaled back. It's incredibly painful. I mean, as a parent, it's painful.
And I think the other thing that really upset people, because she's also the character that's walking around going, Star Wars is cool. She's
Right.
supposed to be.
That was, she was my daughter.
Yeah,
Like,
she's
yeah,
embodied the Star
yeah.
Wars fans, and they didn't want to be told by someone that didn't look like them to also like Star Wars. I think that was the ultimate big problem, because her role, especially in the second movie, was walking around going, "Hey, why are you acting like this?" I mean, essentially, you're the good guys in a Star Wars movie. You should be doing something different. Yeah.
So toxic fandom is a huge part of this, but I think we can't let Disney off the hook. I think there was no vision whatsoever for the new trilogy. And as a fan of Star Wars, I feel like there were so many threads that were just dropped. Whole character.
Didn't you
arcs.
feel like the third one
Totally.
was it was like Abrams was fighting with who directed the second one?
Ryan Johnson.
Like, so Abrams did this thing, and then Ryan Johnson did it, and then now the ninth movie is we're going to continue to argue with each other through what I put, and it was like, you're right. Just let J.J. Abrams say what these three movies need to be about in broad strokes and go. And then we might
But
have liked
that's
it.
not Abrams' style for one. He likes these whole mystery box things and he likes to figure it out later. But the other thing is, I don't think we should Star Wars has never been planned out.
Yeah.
It has never been
Well,
planned
that's
out.
true. That's
It is
a-
never. That is a whole myth.
Yeah.
When Lucas thought the first Star Wars was going to be to the second Star Wars was a totally different thing.
Yeah.
Vader being introduced as his father was a last minute addition to post-production. You have the third movie, no one knew what it was going to be until it was going to be Wookiees, until they decided, hey, you can make more money selling these teddy bears. So it's like, it's always a thing where they're trying to, like I think the Bond franchise, the Star Wars franchise is a reactive franchise to what's popular, what they can be on the cutting edge of, and what they can sell.
Yeah.
So the idea that there's this huge scope is a myth.
Yeah.
They make them film to film, and they decide what's going to go in and what's going to go out, who's going to go in and who's going to go out, each and every time.
Yeah.
Now, that might not be the case for the series, and I don't think it is, because you just can't do a series that way.
Yeah.
But the films, no, they are all by committee, especially after Empire, and there's no grand plan except to get your money.
And you could argue that sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't, and we've seen with the new trilogy how badly it can fail. When
It can
you
absolutely
make a
fail
franchise
badly,
that
yes.
way.
Yeah, to that, I mean, even like Buzz Lightyear, I expected that to be amazing, and it did not work for me. I don't know what the other things, because Toy Story, amazingly, everyone was amazing. I mean, it made me cry at the end of every Toy Story, and then Buzz Lightyear came out. I thought this was going to be a whole new trip for me, and it fell really flat for me. And so it's just like, yeah, I'm sure they feel they have a formula that makes it work, but it's amazing, like when it doesn't work, you realize how fine that line is, because you have what they think are the smartest people in the room figuring this out, and they still can fail. And kind of to that point, I mean, for me, like The Princess Bride is like that. I mean, there's so many ways that can fail. I mean, it's just so campy and just weird, but the way they rolled with it made it one of my favorite films of all time. And it's just like, so there's like, the quote, a Spinal Tap is a fine line between smart, clever and stupid. Is that the line?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like you're battling that, and so some movies are so great, like Princess Bride, but like in terms of commerce, Toy Story and Buzz Lightyear off the cliff for me.
I didn't realize we could have a 3-day panel on what's wrong with Star Wars. I wanted to wrap it up. And Star Wars and Star Trek are incomparable because one is a fantasy film, one is sci-fi. They actually have very little to do with each other. Thank you very much. Star Wars is closer to Harry Potter and King Arthur than it is to Star Trek.
Yes.
Yes, it's the hero's journey. It's a young kid finds a thing, an old man teaches him how to use it, and off we go.
Yeah.
So, but I wanted to kind of hear from you guys and also from the panel, what are some classics that you missed that you think you need to see? And I'll start because I'm a big John Cazale fan, obviously, like Fredo. And he's the only guy, I think he did 5 movies, all nominated for Best Picture. And then he died. But I've never seen Dog Day Afternoon. And so I mean, I've already bought it. It's on its way. They don't have it in 4K, unfortunately. But
I've never seen the Deer Hunter.
Oh, you should. It's really the first one to deal with, like, as a vet, like dealing with PTSD in a real way.
Yeah.
Christopher Walken still acting at that point? Yes, ma'am.
I've never seen Jaws.
So after
I
the
know.
awards, we'll have a special screening.
But I wrote down the movies that y'all said were really important to you.
And then read the Jaws log after you see
Okay.
Jaws, read the Jaws log.
Well, Luke has been leading me through the top 100. You know, he's introduced. I didn't grow up with
Film
the
school.
movies. I didn't.
So, okay, so that's interesting. So you made an amazing movie everybody loved. How do you go from not growing up with movies to?
I don't really know. Now, I've written plays,
Okay.
and so I've seen my writing come to life on stage. I've done theater, I've done improv, I've seen the power of being able to have an idea and get it out to other people. But that was an interesting question. Blazing Saddles was wonderful, and you may see a little Blazing Saddles in Pete and Repeat, but I'm not really sure because I don't have the knowledge or the backstories and the taking in of all the movies. I'm not really sure. It may have come from novels. It may have come from the few that I have seen that were important to me. I did see Star Wars originally. Yes, I'm that old. On the big screen as an 8-year-old. And the garbage compactor scene rocked my It did. For starters, I love Han Solo. He was my first crush.
In many ways, mine too.
But thank you for the compliment. I'm not really sure. I'm absorbing them now. And I'm gonna watch Jaws, and I've never seen Apocalypse. I have to see these things.
What's interesting about the two movies, and you mentioned the Jaws log, which is this fascinating, the Carl Gottlieb, who was kind of brought in to be the Jaws log. And it's his accounting of how the movie got made, because it looks like Apocalypse Now, in many ways, the making of the movie is as fascinating as the movie itself, because could have been disasters. In many ways, Apocalypse Now kind of was a disaster, but they were, but at least Jaws was comprehensible and understandable. But no, so he basically was assigned to write this book on the making of, and it's now become this sort of Bible. I read it before every single film I ever made. I read the Jaws log.
I don't read a lot of books, and but I've read that one multiple times because of what it means to me. And the greatest thing for me from that book is that throughout the whole making of that movie, you feel it. They're on the brink of failure, and they don't see it. I mean, only Spielberg maybe sees it. And if somebody just would have come in earlier and let John Williams play that theme, they all would have been on board from day one. And that didn't come till later. And so it's like, the fact that they didn't know what they had until the very end. It was. That's why the book is so important, because as you're making your project, you may think it's not there, but you see a movie like Jaws, and you're not alone. That other people were scared. That I just totally shit the bed and all that. So.
Well, were you in the room when I told the story? I thought you were in the room when I told the story of the tour guide on my LA kids trip to LA. Were you there? So we were driving around, and my students know that Jaws is where it begins and ends for me. I think The Godfather is the greatest movie of all time, but I think Jaws is my favorite. And my students made a documentary about Mr. D reacts to things he loves in LA, because they knew we were going to get to see the shark and everything. Or as we're driving, this bus driver is like, "Hey, you know where Jaws was made, right?" And one of my kids is like, "Yeah, it was Martha's Vineyard." Well, no, it was shot in LA, and they just made it look like Martha's Vineyard. And all my students are like, "Oh." And I was like, "Actually, I hate to Lucas wanted a sandy bottom in which to put the sled on, and he wanted to shoot in the open ocean, which he regrets probably to this day. So don't ruin my students' education with your I was nicer than that, because he was still driving us around.
Shot though, right?
No, well, yeah, so pickups were done in LA and in Northern, but that one was in San Francisco.
California still.
Right, and then I know, well, no, it's LA in California. That's how they view things out there.
Isn't it true that the shark machine itself kind of broke?
Yeah.
So he wasn't able to shoot, and that actually brought up the tension?
So he joked about it. Again, this is right. I'm sorry. My wife was like, Jessica's so glad I'm not in here, because, oh my God, I've heard this stuff. Spielberg actually jokes that if the shark would have worked, they paid so much money for it, you would have seen it all the time. He would have been a B horror movie. We never would have heard from him again. He was forced to do all those things that made it a Hitchcock film, essentially, based on the fact that every time they would go to work, the shark wasn't working. So how many of y'all remember the famous pier scene where like, I believe they came up with that a week before they shot it, already on Martha's Vineyard, because they ran out of all the other stuff on land to shoot. And they were like, we're here, we have to do something, so.
Well, and you gotta get a bigger boat as an ad-lib.
Yeah, which
I
everybody was
love
mad.
that backstory stuff.
Because everybody was mad, because now you have to reshoot some of the same angles. They're like, oh, great, we've all got seasick, and you decide to change the script. What was a movie, a classic for you that maybe you missed?
Come back to me. I'm thinking.
Mike, you're a child. Which of the many classics have you missed?
I've seen a lot of modern stuff too. I don't watch a lot of things, to be honest. I've never seen Lawrence of Arabia.
Lawrence of Arabia.
I've seen it.
It's great if you get past like Sir Alec Guinness playing an Arab guy, right? Like there's definitely some 1950s problematic.
Oh, is that a thing?
Yeah.
I didn't even. I don't.
That is a thing.
I don't really think that's.
Yeah.
David Lean is really exciting, but yeah, you have to be ready for it. I think.
Is that right?
Yeah, my grandfather really liked David Lean. He had a book about David Lean, and he was one of the first filmmakers that my grandfather kind of respected, because I guess he said something about how there wasn't enough movies being made about people who weren't white, essentially paraphrasing. And my grandfather said, okay, David Lean's all right, in my book, we can watch David Lean. And so.
It's even like, again, going back to Spielberg, like he didn't want to do The Color Purple because he felt like it should have been a director of color, and it was Quincy Jones was like, but they won't let one of us make the movie. You make it channel what it was like to be Jewish into getting that thing going.
I know. Bullet.
I haven't either.
I've never seen it, yeah, but it's just like, I love Stephen King. And it's just like, it's one of those I always pass on, and it's just like, I know I need to watch it, and I never have, but I always want to.
So with my dad on VHS. Yeah, a lot of.
It's on VHS too.
Yeah.
But I love that, again, I love that everything's connected to family with you. It's
Yeah,
so
my dad showed me a lot of movies, but then when I was like, I'm going into show business, he was like, yo, fail! Do something else!
I was gonna say, did your family work in film at all too? 'Cause it
No,
sounds
not
like
at
they're
all.
like- they're
Not at
movie
all.
buffs,
My
you know?
mom was a banker. My dad, he's had a bunch of different jobs over the years. I was the first person in my family to go into the arts. Now, my dad and my grandfather also had a lot of artistic ability, but they came up at a time where there wasn't a lot of opportunities for young Black men to get jobs, so they could have become advertising artists or something like that, but they weren't getting those. My father really wanted to illustrate comic books, and he just never had the chance. So when I wanted to go into the arts, I think they really wanted to spare me that pain and judgment. So I think they're fine with it now, but yeah, definitely got in.
Well, now you're everywhere though, so of course they're fine with it. I mean, you literally did a commercial everyone's seen, and every time I see it, I pause and take a selfie. You're probably tired of the selfies.
Never.
What about you guys? I know we're over time. This has been fun, but what are some of the movies maybe that you've not seen that you've missed that you think I need to go revisit? Drew.
I've never seen any of the Rockies.
Wow. Oh my God.
Start with just the first one.
Yeah.
Start with the first one.
Don't listen to Darian. Number 1, 3, and 4. Although 4 is basically a music video. But in many ways, I think the Rocky Balboa is the best of the series.
They all have their merits.
Rocky 5 doesn't. It's pretty meritless.
Yeah, Rocky 5's pretty good. But you gotta watch Rocky 5 to get to 6. But just watching the first Rocky, I almost never
Creed movies. Yeah.
And the Creed movies are good too.
Yeah.
But the
Creed
first
movies-
Rocky, I can't watch without ever. I cry.
Yeah.
It's incredibly touching story.
It was another movie I got to see in theaters for the first time this year. There's like a local cinema in Toronto. They've been showing loads of.
My mom was obsessed with Rocky.
Really?
Oh my gosh, she was obsessed with Rocky and Stallone. So we saw Rocky a million times. Every Rocky, she loved Rocky. But the best Stallone movie, Nighthawks.
The correct answer is Over the Top.
No, Nighthawks.
That time was a cliffhanger for me. Over the top that. I think he's cheating, actually. Like, I believe that's not.
Nobody's gonna say victory? Come on.
No, you know what was the one? What was the comedy he did?
No.
No. Oscar. Because it was his first attempt to be in. I actually thought it was good.
That's my dad. You met my dad yesterday. That's his favorite movie of all time, and I can barely sit through it except for Marissa Tomei. She's delightful.
Well, the next panel is on Jim's top 5 list that him and his wife have shared. That it's okay if number 2 was in that movie. Yeah, I'm sorry, I have a Marissa Tomei thing. It's okay.
Yeah, even I do. Yeah.
Us and Han Solo. It's a whole thing.
Together and
Other. I know before we get out. Yeah.
I hadn't seen any James Dean movies. Not one. I know there's only like 3, but you know.
Giant.
Yeah.
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 I've never seen Rebel Without a Cause.
Oh, really?
Really?
Yeah.
It's fun. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Anybody else? All right. Thank you guys for going on this little weird journey with us. And we have a bunch more films going on. We have a bunch more stuff. And then the awards tonight at 6:30. They should be done by 8. And then we will commence au festival, to quote Jack Nicholson's Joker in 1989 Batman. Thanks, guys.
no, I apologize. I didn't mean to come off as aggressive.
I just was.
I'm hungover and we need coffee.
I do apologize. I'm just laying down.
No, no.
Right. Very much.
No, I wrote you a little.
I'm so excited. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, so Jim Warren.
Spielberg, really? Oh,
Yeah, and so it's just,
Are you going to the blog?
yeah.
I'm gonna go heat up my pizza. I saw a microwave down in the kitchen area, so. Bring it over.
I agree.
I did the Bumblebee thing too.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
Oh, you should have. I've never met anybody else.
My aunt. I got actually she kind of.
Well, I don't know, like, I know my dad like walked us to the front of the line because they knew it was like a big movie, and somehow we were like they just picked kids from the audience. So I was like, okay, it is something.
That's definitely my top.
Well, it's funny. It's not my favorite movie. I've actually, since I was a kid, I've only seen it once. Like I rewatched it a couple years ago, but I didn't want to rewatch it because like sometimes it's like what it did for me and the memory of it is more important than what it is, right?
Right.
And a lot of people don't really. I really love like it's not. People talk about Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. That's why I know.
I let my kids watch it.
Yeah.
They loved it.
Well, it's really good, and I did rewatch it, and I did love it, and it did hold up. It's like, yeah, no, it
I
really
love
is.
movies that hold up like that.
Yes.
The special effects look good.
Yeah.
Like they still look like they
Yeah,
really.
let me grab my joke.
Okay.
Stuff, not my joke, you know, whatever. I don't have to. I have his turn.
Oh, Honey, Shrunk the Kids.
Oh my God, somebody just ordered the Jaws log based on